What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 469. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, welcome back. How was your week off?
It was good. It was good. I, got to catch up on all the things I didn't, that lagged behind. Sleep, definitely one of those things.
Nice. Very good. We had a fun show with Ryan. Generated a lot of conversation as well. Sure. Yeah,
I believe thread. The most commented on thread that I've ever seen for an episode.
Yeah, I think so too. In the LR subreddit, people were very passionate about the arena stuff that we talked about. And by the way, I do have a note from Ryan. He did make a post in that subreddit that I'll put a link in the show notes to for people that wanted to follow up. But he did have a correction that he wanted to make, which was the starter bundle, the welcome bundle that you can buy for $5 on Arena. He said, the correction is that is actually really good value. You're getting a little better than 2 times the value on the gems that you get in that versus like the $100 gem purchase that he recommended. So he recommends now that you try to scrape together those $5 when you start, because you're really getting like a lot of bang for buck out of that for your gems. And then you can go free to play or whatever the balance is after that. He also had some follow-up thoughts on the matchmaking and stuff too. So again, I'll put a link for that in the show notes, so that you can read that. And thanks again to Ryan for coming on, and make sure that you check out his stream. Boy, he's been doing great. He kind of had a few beta streams where he told me not to tweet about it yet. He was just kind of figuring out the microphones and how to play and all that stuff. But then we blew it open with Going Optimal here on the show last week, and he's had great streams, 10 a.m. every day. And it's been really fun to watch him kind of come into his own as a streamer and start to get more established on Twitch. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. This show, we're going to be talking about Ultimate Masters. Ultimate Masters is coming out this weekend, and we know that everybody's excited for it. But we also know that most of our listeners don't get a chance to draft it that much. It's very expensive to draft in real life. And so most of our listeners drafted about once. They'll scrape together the money needed to do 1 draft or so, maybe 2 or maybe 0, depending. And then they'll be done with it. So instead of doing a card by card set review, we like to do these set primers. These sets, of course, are made up of all reprints. So these are kind of known quantities already. But we do like to give you an idea of how the set is put together and what things to look out for. We're going to go color by color and then examine a few of examine the mechanics, as well as some of the potential archetypes that you may see in Ultimate Masters, so that you feel more comfortable and ready to go when you sit down to do your draft of that. All right, before we get into that though, channelfireball.com, that's the place to go for all things Magic related on the internet. They are the proud sponsors of this show, and we're proud to have them along. They've got, bless you. You're not allergic to CFB, are you?
Certainly hope not.
I hope not too. So that could be a real problem for your career. Channel Fireball has Ultimate Masters. You can pre-order or order depending on what time you're listening to the show right now, and you'll get your box of 24, not 36, but there's 24 in there. And of course, every box comes with that cool promo box topper. I have actually pre-ordered a box that I'm going to be using for show-related purposes, and I'm going to give away the box topper for that on the show as well. We'll probably do a little opening for it when I finally get it, and one lucky patron will be getting their hands on whatever box topper that we open up for that. But again, channelfireball.com. Check them out for Ultimate Masters or anything else you need. They're the place to go for free content, as well as great service, quick shipping, and a full selection of all Magic products. channelfireball.com. You can support the show directly via Patreon, which I just mentioned, patreon.com/limited resources. Thank you if you're on there. It means a lot to both Luis and I that you help the show out and keep us going the way that you do. It is a real pleasure to deal with everybody on the Patreon. They're so supportive and great. Our most dedicated listeners are over there, and we really appreciate each and every one of you. So much so that I send away a playmat. Let me grab one here. I don't know which one I'm giving away lately, Luis. I just grabbed one off the top of the pile,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you have quite the selection to choose from.
Ooh, this one's sweet, actually. Where did I get this? I think this was just one that I got. Anyway, whatever. It's going out to a listener. This is a Steam Vents from Return to Ravnica from 2012. And that's a sweet bit of artwork there. So that one is going to go to our listener. and our patron, Nicholas Farley from Old Bridge, New Jersey. Thank you, Nicholas, for your support of the show. And I'll put your playmat on the pile. I'm kind of gathering a large pile of them to go take down at once. So if you've won one from a while back, don't worry. It didn't get lost in the mail. I'm just going to ship kind of a whole bunch of them together. And so that's why it hasn't arrived yet. But thank you, Nicholas, for that. We're going to be skipping the Crack-a-Pack this week because it would be Guilds of Ravnica. And we're talking Ultimate Masters on this show. And we've already done a bunch of Crack-a-Pack, so it doesn't feel like we're leaving anything super bad on the table. So let's get into this. Ultimate Masters is, as I mentioned, a reprint only set, like all of the Masters sets have been. And of note here, this will be the last Masters set for the foreseeable future. It feels like Wizards feels like it's kind of run its course here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different themes that have gone to Masters, some more successful than others, and I think that the well is, getting pretty close to dry. I wouldn't be surprised if they pull some more rabbits out of hats here, but I can understand. I can understand wanting to call it here.
I can too. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because these master sets serve multiple purposes, right? Not only are they sweet limited sets that we get to draft at least a few times, or maybe on Magic Online a bunch of times in the Phantom drafts, but they also get to introduce sought after and valuable rares into the ecosystem that they would have a hard time putting in modern sets. So.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because the master sets they're a Magic product, and the conceit behind that, Magic products is that they're going to be fun to play, and they are fun to play. But there's a hidden subtext, or maybe not so hidden, of like reprinting cards to get cards into people's hands. Right. When Tarmogoyfs are $250 or $200 or $150 or whatever point they hit at, it's not as good as if for Magic players if Tarmogoyfs are $40. And the Masters are kind of meant to do that, whether or not that would be explicitly stated.
Yeah, or definitely not explicitly stated, as they generally are.
Well, so, you hear language like getting desirable cards into the hands of players, and that's just what that means. It just means like, hey, it's not great that Dark Confidant's $80. Let's make it $30. Not that there's exactly price targets, but that is the point. It is so people can play Magic, and there's a lot of cards not bound by the beloved reserve list that
that is true. The beloved, yeah. So in Ultimate Masters, again, last one we're going to see for a while, so let's enjoy it. 254 cards, 101 commons, 80 uncommons, 53 rares, and 20 mythic rares. And boy, there are some nice ones. I've been kind of poring over the full set file, and man, there's some sweet stuff in this set. It releases on December 7th. And of course, there are 40 different premium box topper cards. One will be in each box that you get. And these are those full, like, extended art, beautiful. I mean, these cards are just flat out gorgeous. Some of the best looking cards, from a design perspective that I've seen out of Wizards of the Coast. I haven't seen one in person, but I hope they look as good as they do in the pictures, because these things look sick. And you get one of those no matter what, but they're not part of the set as a draft environment thing. So there's a lot of keywords in this set, and we're going to go over every single one of them briefly, and then we'll kind of dial in on the ones that seem to stand out as being more important.
I've also got a Crack-a-Pack too when we want to do that.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, I used a generator, but we do have a pack we can go over once we're ready.
Oh, I like that. When do you want to do it? Do you want to do it at the end?
Let's do it after the keywords. I think that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, because we're going to go into the colors after that. So, and this isn't. I just wanted to touch on this to kind of give a broad strokes. Anyway, this doesn't need to be
it gives you a good sense of not only how complicated the set is, which is very, these sets are always complicated, but also like what the themes of the set are. So like, for example, we have Annihilator, which is on four rare / mythic cards, and then two uncommons or two non-rares. So that's not like a huge part of the set. It's just like, there's some Eldrazi in the set.
Exactly. And Annihilator's not a thing that you tend to build around. It's a standalone mechanic anyway.
But then you look at Delve and Dredge, and there's 6 Delve cards and 3 non-rare or Dredge cards. So, okay, these are actually themes of the set. You get, Gurmag Angler, Hooting Mandrills, Treasure Cruise, all common, Golgari Brownscale, Golgari Thug, and Dakmor Selvage at uncommon and common.
Yep.
So you end up like, okay, this is something that actually informs my deck building.
Right. And these are the types of, you'll notice that these mechanics will fall into one of those two categories that you just described, something that would help me describe what I want to do with my deck, and things that are just there and powerful. Like the next one is it touches a little bit into the, what I want to do with my deck, but a lot of times it's on its own. It's called Evoke. And there's 6 Evoke cards in the set. That's the type of one that has a creature that costs a certain amount with an enter the battlefield ability, but you can pay a reduced amount to have it enter the battlefield, but then get sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. So you still get the ability. It kind of feels like a spell, but it is going to the graveyard. It is a sacrifice trigger. There's a whole bunch of things that can be around it. And there's 6 of those as well, including Shriekmaw, which is a really good one. It's the terror version of a evoke creature. And there's also an Ether Snipe, which is a bounce spell that tends to do pretty well in these type of sets. Exalted is in this set, but it only appears on 3 cards and they're all rares. So it's not really a feature of this set. We're not going to be building Exalted deck. So that's one we can kind of put on the back burner. Flashback. Now, Flashback is a huge mechanic in this set. In fact, I would call it the marquee mechanic for the set. It appears on 17 cards in this set, and also Snapcaster Mage, which gives something Flashback. It's a big deal. Flashback touches all the colors in the set. And again, it's the mechanic that has the most raw numbers in it. So
it is kind of funny given Jumpstarting Guilds of Ravnica that Flashback is a big part of the set, but I guess that's just how it lined up.
Yeah. And I mean, the joke, in fact, I think Ryan mentioned this on the show last week, is that, there's a joke in R&D that like all mechanics are Flashback. It's like pay more for more, right? Like that's kind of the idea.
Well, it's kicker. All mechanics are kicker.
Oh yeah. Kicker. Sorry.
Right.
But Flashback is
is one of them, but
yes,
all mechanics are actually kicker.
Yeah. And Flashback, for those that haven't played it, right, is a spell or a card that you cast. And when it's in the graveyard, you can pay some amount of mana to cast it again. And again, 17 cards. So that's a big, red flag. Hey, look here. And then we've also got Heroic, which has been pushed a little bit. There are 8 cards with Heroic in the set. There's 4 of them are white, 2 of them are red, and 2 of them are green. So white's kind of the main one there. And we'll look at that. There is a heroic sub-theme in the set for sure. The next one's really interesting because this is always the trickiest one to figure out where it fits in, and it's Madness. There are 8 Madness cards in the set, and all of them are common or uncommon. There's 3 red, 2 black, 2 blue, and 1 Basking Rootwalla, which is green. Madness, though, is a very weird mechanic, right? It's a spell has a normal cost, but if that spell would be discarded, you can pay what usually ends up being a reduced cost for it instead. But you have to have a way to discard it from your hand, or else you're always going to pay full price for these cards. So Madness is not a standalone thing. It needs to be enabled. Where like Flashback, you can usually just cast the spell and then flash it back later at some point. Madness isn't like that. So this one also requires you to build around it, but we really need to know kind of what are the enablers for it before we go on. But I mean, just as a designer, right, when you see 8 Madness cards at all below rare, I mean, that has to be a sub-theme in the set, right?
Oh, totally. And that makes discard outlets a lot more valuable.
Okay. So we'll keep an eye out for those. Both Persist and Undying are in the set. Persist
which is pretty funny.
Yeah, they're similar. But the way it actually worked out is that it's not that much of a thing here. Persist cards, there's 6 of them, including some really powerful ones like Kitchen Finks and Murderous Redcap. Undying is actually not technically in the set outside of Machias the Unhallowed, which gives your other creatures Undying. So that's not something we're really concerned about. But Persist is, and I mean, if you're sacrificing a creature, it comes right back. Also, it's just a value mechanic that can be a standalone. So I wouldn't expect it to be one of the marquee mechanics, but there's enough. I mean, there's 6 Persist cards. That's quite a bit. Regenerate appears on 5 cards, but it isn't a mechanic that actually drives anything in this set. There's actually only 1 card that has Regenerate itself, and the rest of them allow you to regenerate other things, but that's not something that we're going to be building around. That's just a standalone as well. Same thing with Splice onto Arcane, which is one of the most absurd mechanics they've ever made. I still don't actually know how to do it correctly.
It's a pretty parasitic mechanic, and it doesn't show up on a lot of cards. There's actually 3 cards, 2 of which are rare, and then there's Kadama's Reach at common, which is an arcane spell to kind of give you.
I did not know that. Okay.
Right, something to splice onto, but it's still not a mechanic that's really going to factor that much into drafting or deck.
I mean, over under a number of times that you splice onto Arcane. It's low.
I've been splice a couple times, but not a whole lot.
Yeah, but you're also you're probably the most likely person in the whole world to see. Yeah, I think I would put my over under at 0.5 and just take the under. Like I don't even know how to do it right. So. And then go ahead.
Well, I'm actually going to the Ultimate Masters Grand Prix, so I'm gonna be jamming a bit. Yeah, we're both actually playing in the Grand Prix, which is kind of weird, right?
It's gonna be sweet. Yeah, I actually wasn't planning on going. I'm gonna get back from Barcelona from the World Magic Cup, and I thought, well, I'll just cruise for the rest of the year. But then you messaged me and said, well, I think I'm actually gonna go to this GP, and I'm like, really? You're gonna go? Like, that would be kind of sweet. And then I messaged Woody, and he was like, I think I can make that work. And Adam wanted to go, and it's like, okay, fine, we're going to a GP. So that'll be sweet. I'm excited to get to battle, though, for sure. Last mechanic is Totem Armor. And Totem Armor comes on auras called Umbras, which allow you to, if the creature that it's on would get destroyed, you can sacrifice the Umbra and keep the creature around instead. And it's actually a thing. There are 6 Umbras in this set, 3 in green, 2 in white, and 1 of them is blue. And there's even cards there's combos. Like, for example, we mentioned Heroic, which rewards you for targeting the creature with a spell. And then there's these Umbras, these Totem Armor cards that target creatures with spells. So you can start to put these two things together and figure out how that's going to go. So I think Totem Armor is actually something that we're going to be.
And that's a really powerful mechanic too.
It is. Yeah. It looks crappy, and it does carry the risk of, I want to target my creature and they kill it or bounce it from underneath it. But once it sticks, it actually, nullifies a lot of the different types of removal in the set, burn or most of the black removal that doesn't exile and that kind of stuff. All right. Why don't we crack that pack that you generated there, and then we'll start breaking down the colors.
Yeah. All right. There's a pack cracking this. Well, speaking of Kadam's Reach, let's start with that one. That's 2 and a green. It's a Arcane Sorcery, a common. And it says search your library for up to 2 basic lands, put 1 on the battlefield tapped and the other in your hand. So always a great card because it's, first of all, it's a divination, right? It's 3 mana to draw 2 cards. Both are lands. So, when you don't need lands, it doesn't draw you that much, though it thins your deck a little, but it puts a land into play and it fixes your mana really nicely. So in a 3-color deck, this card's great, or 3+ colors. And even in a 2-color deck, this is a good ramp spell that's also a 2-for-1. So I'm pretty happy taking Kadam's Reach. It's always great in sets like this.
I also, we have seen pretty consistently that many of these sets support a green-based 5-color or 4-color deck, and this would be the premium common for it.
Yeah, and you can't replace something like Kadam's Reach very easily because it's a fixer that fixes 2 colors at once.
Right.
So next up is Stitch Drake. This is 1 blue for a 3/4 flying zombie Drake, and as an additional cost to cast it, you have to exile a creature from your graveyard. So clearly a 3-mana 3/4 flying is a very good deal, but you're really not going to be able to play this on turn 3 very often. And even if you can play it later, depending on your deck, that actually might cost you something because there are themes that really do want you to have cards in your graveyard. So
yeah, self-mill. And by the way, this is going to be a theme that we're going to see throughout the course of this whole episode, is that the graveyard matters a lot. It just does. And this is just one of many graveyard payoffs besides the stuff that we already mentioned, like Flashback and that kind of thing, is a card like Stitch Drake.
So I don't like this as much as Kadam's Reach. So I think I would start there. Next up, we have Think Twice, the 1 in a blue, instant draw a card, Flashback 2 in a blue. So this is a card that's always better than it looks because it is a 2-for-1, even if it costs 5 mana. The fact that you can split it up between 2 and 3 mana, it does help. And then it works really nicely with discard and self-mill because it just generates value even from the graveyard. So my inclination is to take Stitch Drake or Think Twice over Stitch Drake, but I would still rather start with Kadam's Reach.
Yeah, I love Think Twice. That's one of my, probably top 20 favorite cards or something. So I'm super stoked.
It is very good. Yeah. Next up is Wingsteed Rider. This is 1 white for a 2/2 flying, and it has Heroic. Put a +1 counter on Wingsteed Rider, which is whenever you cast a spell that targets Wingsteed Rider, this triggers. I'm sure this is going to be a fine common. The red-white Heroic deck does seem like it has a lot of support, but I'm not taking Wingsteed Rider over Kadam's Reach, or probably even Think Twice.
I'm not either, but I think this is going to be an absolutely crucial common for the red, white,
and the red. Pretty solid, yeah.
I think it's better. Like, I think this is kind of like, how many of these can I get with my Auras deck? I just don't want to play that deck.
I guess it is. The evasion does really matter.
Yeah, it really does. It gets huge. I mean, you put 1 Umbra on it, it's probably like a 5/5 flyer.
Right. Next one's pretty sweet. This is Grave Scrambler. This is 3 and a black for a 2/2 zombie. So that part's not good. But it has Madness of 1 and a black, which means when you discard it, you can pay 1 and a black to just cast it. So it's pretty nice if you have like, the looting type effects where you discard for value and you just get to play this for 2 mana. And when it enters the battlefield, if you paid the madness cost, you get to return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. So,
ooh, it's Gravedigger if you madness it.
Yeah. So if you madness it, it's a 2 mana 2/2 that draws you a creature from your graveyard. If you don't madness it, it's horrendous.
Wow.
Also, Future Sight cards are just so unbelievably weird. When you pay the madness card, you can return target creature from a graveyard to its owner's hand. Technically, you can give them their creature back. I don't understand why you would do that.
They would not print that today.
No, good lord, no. So, I think Grave Scrambler is cute, but having played with this card back when it was in Time Spiral, block draft, it's the kind of card you take if you have a lot of madness outlets. It's not a card you start with, and I would imagine it's worse than almost any of the other cards we've seen so far.
And this is also the only deck that wants this is the Madness deck. So you can get this way later if you're in that deck. Okay.
Next up is Dark Dabbling. This is 2 and a black for an instant, and it says regenerate target creature, draw a card. And it has Spell Mastery, which means if there's 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, also regenerate every creature you control.
Ugh.
Yeah, no, not particularly good.
No, that seems bad, especially in black. Like, what do we? Anyway, yeah.
Next up is Verdant Idol. I believe Dissension reprint. This is 3 and a green for a 2/2 spirit, a common, so it's a little overcosted. 4 mana 2/2. You can pay a green and sacrifice it to add 3 mana of any one color to your mana pool. So that's a little weird, and then the last clause is whenever you cast a multicolored spell, you may return this from your graveyard to your hand.
Whoa, weird.
Yeah, crazy common too. And this was actually a common in the original set, so that's even crazy.
Was it really? This was a common? Oh my God. And I'm not saying that for power level, although it does seem fairly powerful. I'm just like, that's so weird. This reads like a modern day rare.
Totally. So in a deck with a lot of multicolored spells, this is a 4 mana 2/2 that every time it dies, you can bring it back. But it also lets you sacrifice to, bust out something big. I can imagine ramp decks actually wanting this card.
Okay. Yeah, I can't. I have. This is an extraordinarily strange card.
Also, if you dredge it,
Kodama's Reach is better.
Or discard it, you can start getting it back. Yeah, Kodama's Reach is better. But this Verdant Idolon, the Eidolons tended to be a little better than they look. They look pretty crappy, but they are not bad.
Okay.
Next up, we're at Moan of the Unhallowed. This is 2 black sorcery. It's a common, though it used to be an uncommon. Makes 2 2/2 zombies tokens. So 4 mana for 2 2/2 zombies. Pretty good deal. And then you can flash it back for 7 mana, 5 BB. So it's kind of a 4-for-1 in that, over the course of 11 mana and multiple turns, makes 4 2/2 zombies. And you're getting a pretty good rate on the first one. So the flashback being a little expensive is doable. I like Moan of the Unhallowed. I actually wouldn't be surprised if this was the pick.
Yeah, I loved this card in Innistrad when it was an uncommon, and I feel like it being common is really kind of catching my eye here. It is not particularly fast, and Ultimate Masters will certainly be more powerful, raw power than we had in Innistrad, so I don't know how it matches up there, but this card is value. I do know
Well,
that.
It also really punishes removal decks. If you're sitting on a handful of removal and they cast this card, you almost just want to concede. So
right. Also, ground-based aggro decks hate this card. It just stabilizes you. Yeah, it's really good.
So that would probably be my pick right now. Next up, we have Bloodflow Connoisseur. It's a 2 and a black for a 1/1, and you can sack a creature to put a ++1 counter on it. Yeah, I can see this as being part of the sacrifice theme, but definitely not a card I'm taking super early here.
Yep.
Next one is nice, though. This is Shriekmaw. 4 and a black for a 3/2. Has fear, so it can't be blocked except by artifacts and black creatures. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature, and then you can evoke it. So you can, for 1 and a black, you can cast it and then sacrifice it immediately, but it still gets his ETB trigger. So
this card's dumb.
Shriekmaw's absurd.
I love it.
5 mana 3/2 kill a creature would be great. Giving it fear is really good because it's a legit threat by itself. And then the fact that you can evoke it in a pinch is really strong. Or if you need like a sacrifice a creature to get back from your graveyard, or you're playing a sacrifice deck, so you can evoke it, then sack it in response to the trigger. Shriekmaw is excellent. We're definitely taking it, and I'd be surprised if we took anything else out of the pack.
Yeah, Shriekmaw's just too good.
Next up, we have Furnace Celebration. It says 1 red. It's an enchantment, and it says whenever you sacrifice another permanent, you may pay 2 to deal 2 to any target.
Mm-hmm. And, we had that Blood Flow Connoisseur, and I think that there's a full-on deck based around sacrificing stuff, and Furnace Celebration's kind of the build-around for it, although I don't know that it's necessarily necessary. There's other cards that pay you off by killing your opponent, but Furnace Celebration seems like a pretty cool way to do it, too. Yeah,
Furnace Celebration is a really cool build-around, and I'm curious to see what all the enablers are for it, but I would still just take Shriekmaw.
Same.
Next up, we have Prismatic Lens, which I wish was a common. It's a very fun common. It's two mana artifact, taps to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, and you can pay 1 and tap it to add a mana of any color to your mana pool. So it's a mana rock that fixes all colors at a little bit of a cost.
Yeah, you can either use it to ramp out colorless mana, just get you 1 ahead, or to do it. This is a really good card, but yeah, I'm still taking Shriekmaw.
So our rare is Woodfall Primus. It's 5 green, so 8 mana for a 6/6 Treefolk Shaman at rare. It has Trample. When it enters the battlefield, destroy a non-creature permanent, and it has Persist, so when it dies, it comes back with a -1/-1 counter. So Cube, All-Star, and Staple, Woodfall Primus.
I used to have... I once paid $50
for
a foil.
I remember that.
I still never got it.
Yeah, that certainly makes it a worse deal.
Yes, in retrospect, that's probably on me. Would we take it's an 8-drop? Like I assume
this card's
not, right? Just
not only worse than Shriekmaw, it's probably worse than Prismatic Lens, which is a nice little ramp card, or Kodama's Reach, or honestly Mona the Unhallowed. Yeah, so. I'm not a big Woodfall
Shriek it up.
Yeah, and then we have a foil because every pack has one, and that's a Whirlwind Adept.
Oh, I forgot about that. Wait, really? Whirlwind Adept?
4 and a blue for a...
This is your boy.
I love this. I won a Grand Prix based on this card.
I remember. I covered it. I still can't. I don't know how you beat Dave with it, right?
Yeah.
How did you win that? So
let's read the card first. It's 4 and a blue for a 4/2 Hexproof Prowess. So it can't be targeted except by your stuff, and then it has prowess. So whenever you play a non-creature spell, it gets ++1 on a turn. So the deck I won with, and the deck that you would want this in, is play this and put a bunch of home spells on it. And kind of a silly strategy, but it ended up working. I don't think that this card's in the contention here. It's even worse than Winged Steed Rider if that's the sort of thing you're going for.
Also, I don't know why it's here, right? Like, all the other stuff that we've seen has cared about graveyards or being discarded or sacrificed or things. Like, the way I'm kind of envisioning it is like there's a strong graveyard theme, and then there's this when cards move zones, like you discard one or it gets sacrificed, like any of these sort of weird interactions, and then there's just randomly this sort of junky prowess creature. I'm really curious to see how
I could see in. Like a blue-white or blue-red sub-theme of like, this is essentially a heroic creature. It doesn't actually have heroic, but it's good with almost all the cards that are good with heroic.
Okay, like the auras.
Right,
okay, that makes sense.
If you put Hyena Umbra on this and give it ++1 on first strike, like, this card's a monster.
Sure. No, that's a great point. Also, there are a few aura-centric blue cards, which is kind of strange to me in the set. So that does make sense. This is a huge slippery bogle. So, okay. Cool. Oh boy. I'm after doing that
cracker pack maybe want to draft the set.
Definitely. Okay, let's break down some of the colors here and get an idea for what they're going on from broad strokes, and then we'll put together a few of the combos so that you can kind of see what's going on. But you can also be thinking in your head, what's your favorite combo? What are the things that you're looking forward to, and start to try to piece together what it is that these are doing. So white, as often, looks kind of aggressive, and it looks like it's got a bit of a battle cruiser theme going on, meaning that instead of making like a whole bunch of tokens and going wide, you're going tall. You're building a whole bunch of things on 1 or 2 creatures and trying to kill your opponent that way. It's got a lot of good targets for auras and pump spells thanks to heroic, and even some nice non-heroic ones. We mentioned Winged Steed Rider, which is, I think, one of the better commons for that. But there's also one called Sky Spear Cavalry, which is a real clunker. It's 3 white for a 2/2 flyer, but it's got double strike, and it's a common. So if you get anything going on it, auras-wise, I mean, you're going to win the game in very short order. Now it's just high risk, high reward.
It's also
5 mana 2/2.
Essentially a 4-power common flyer. So
True. Yeah, when it attacks in the air.
So I do want to make a note about the Umbras. So these are cards like Hyena Umbra. It's a white for an aura that gives a creature ++1 on first strike. It has Totem Armor, which says, if an enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. So the Totem Armor cards are a lot better than they look. 1 white for a ++1 on first strike is not a card I would willingly put in my deck. It's just not a good card. And then like you look at Mammoth Umbra, that's another common. It's 4 and a white for +3/+3 in Vigilance, also with Totem Armor. The thing is, Totem Armor is a really powerful ability because it protects you from lethal damage. So if you put Mammoth Umbra on your 2/2 and they block it with a 5/5, you lose the Umbra, you don't lose your creature. It protects it from removal spells as well. So any destroy effect won't actually work. And it even stops sweepers. Right. I mean, one of the things that comes up in like Modern all the time is you've got a Supreme Verdict and they have a Slippery Boggle with a bunch of Umbras on it. It just doesn't work. You kill the Umbra, but you don't kill the creature. So don't underestimate how powerful Totem Armor is. And I would suspect that most of the Umbras are just going to see play.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think we're being pushed to play them. You could search them up and get them back, even just in white. There's a card called Heliod's Pilgrim, 2 and a white for a 1/2. And when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for an aura, reveal it, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Like, that is a body to put it on, plus any aura in your deck. You can go get your Mammoth Umbra and slam it on whatever creature a couple of turns later. There's also Lotus Eye Mystics, these are all common, by the way. 3 and a white for a 3/2 human monk. It happens to have prowess. But the interesting thing is when it enters a battlefield, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. So, they do spend a removal spell to get the Mammoth Umbra off of your creature and make it more manageable. You play Lotus Eye Mystics, get back the Mammoth Umbra, and you can just start looping these things. So they're clearly pushing this here, right? I mean, we have Umbras, ways to get them, and heroic creatures in this set. So white, battle cruiser it up, go tall and build some really nasty stuff in the air.
Yeah, it's funny because in sets like this strategy would normally be very bad because the powerful sets that have good bounce, good removal, good card draw, they don't lend themselves to this kind of nonsense. But Heliod's Pilgrim and Lotus Eye Mystics, plus the fact that Umbras are fairly powerful intrinsically, they even fight against removal, right? Makes me think that the white theme of auras is better than it would look on first read. I imagine this is going to be a decent place to be.
Yeah. For me, I look at this and I think, well, this isn't really what I want to do. Like, this doesn't really get me going, but I am definitely going to lose to this. And it doesn't feel like I'm going to lose to it and feel like it's unfair. I think this is going to be powerful. Yeah. Like, I just think that these things are just going to be strong. For blue looks way different. It looks like the thing that I kind of noticed is it feels like it's an enabler for other strategies, mainly graveyard type stuff.
As historically done.
Yeah, it does usually do that. Cards like Deranged Assistant, it's 1 and a blue for a 1/1 human wizard. And this is a really weird card. You tap it to mill yourself for 1 and add a colorless mana pool.
So after playing with this card in Innistrad, a lot of people think this is a drawback, right? I mean, even the original Milliken from a million years ago in Odyssey was basically this. And the truth of the matter is it's an advantage. Milling yourself for 1 in a vacuum tends to be upside given the cards that are going to be in your deck. So,
absolutely. You wish it milled you for 2, right. You'd be happy. Yeah. And then it lets you, the extra mana that it brings you kind of randomly in blue, lets you pay oftentimes for flashback spells, which are generally more expensive when you're flashing them back, and you might mill one into your graveyard. And also, Deranged Assistant gives the best sweats when you really need something and you mill, add the mana, and then see what you milled, and hopefully it's a flashback card that you can cast right then. That actually happens occasionally. It's a really good sweat if you need that mill to be something important. But yeah, this is going to fill up the graveyard sort of at a steady clip for cards that have Delve, which reduce the cost by exiling cards, and then also just get you value from flashback.
It's great for Delve. It adds multiple to it.
That's right. So Deranged Assistant, good enabler. Another one a little more simple. It's called Sulci's Skullkeeper. 1 and a blue for a 2/1. When it enters a battlefield, you mill yourself for 2.
Yeah.
So again, filling up your graveyard is what you want to be doing in these type of decks. And there might even be some madness going on here, though. I noticed there's a card called Skywing Aven. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/1 flyer, which is like, okay, it's common, but it has an activated ability, discard a card and return it to its owner's, return the Skywing Aven to its owner's hand. But it's a non-mana discard ability, which is what you look for when you're talking about madness enablers, because you usually still have to pay mana for the madness card. So if you can get that discard without having to pay anything, it makes it more likely that you can pay the madness cost and get that value.
Yeah, looking at blue, there's not a ton of madness cards. It looks like
No, again, and that's why I was saying I think it's an enabler rather than a like built in. You know what I mean? Like you could see in white that you could build a mono white deck that would function, but blue, I think you're going to need help no matter what.
Yeah, it has some really good support cards like Treasure Cruise is just a really powerful card that helps you get everything you need going. Also, Dig Through Time at rare, but that's less relevant. And then Archaeomancer, the 2 blue 1/2 that returns a instant or sorcery from a graveyard to your hand when you play it. Like this card is going to be really good with self-mill, really good with dredge, and good in like a control deck that just has a bunch of removal.
Yeah, and there's some other clunky payoffs too, like Stitch Drake, which we had in our Crack-A-Pack. But there's also Meringue River Prowler. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/1 that can't block and can't be blocked, but you can cast it from your graveyard as long as you control a black or green permanent. So again, if you're like a blue-black mill deck and you have a black permanent and you mill the River Prowler, you can get it back just for, without having to draw it. You can just cast it from your yard. And, these aren't game-ending, amazing things, but this is some value, right? I mean, these are some of the payoffs that you can get. A super cheap 3/4 flyer, you can get your cards back with Archaeomancer. The Prowler comes in, or you can get on the boat and ride to Value Town on that way too. So I think that blue probably leaves us the most to be understood about what the important cards are that enable like multiple graveyard strategies at once. But I would look to cards like Skullkeeper and Deranged Assistant first.
Yeah, man. I think that Deranged Assistant and Treasure Cruise are going to be among the most important blue cards almost no matter where you end up.
Yeah, and they work so well together. I mean, it's adding effectively 2 mana towards your treasure.
Another thing I want to note that doesn't apply just to blue, but in general, is in these master sets, you see a lot of rarity downgrades. Like Laboratory Maniac is an uncommon. So that gives you a really good self-mill reward. Mahamudi Jin's an uncommon, 6 mana, 5/6 flyer, because, well, it just doesn't meet the bar for rare anymore. So it's worth looking at cards that you think, wow, this card is uncommon now, because there are a lot of cards that look like they should be rares because they were rares earlier, and uncommons still make a big impact.
No, it's a very good point. And those are often cards to keep an eye on as well, because they might have moved them down to try to power up something. And hey, we can take advantage of that. Black, as you might imagine, is very graveyard centric. It's got one kind of premium delve card, I guess. It's Golgari Thug. It has delve. I meant dredge. Yeah. It has a dredge card. And Golgari Thug has dredge 4, which is a pretty, it doesn't get much higher than that. Only goes up to 6. And basically, it's 1 and a black for a 1/1 with dredge 4. And dredge is if you would draw a card, instead, you can mill yourself for the dredge number, in this case 4, and then put the Golgari Thug into your hand instead of the card you were going to draw. It also has the ability of when it dies, put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, which I don't... Does that do things? Like, I've never really understood that from Golgari Thug.
In Constructed, it's mostly a drawback because the dredge decks don't want to do that. But in Limited, it tends to be an advantage. Note that it's not optional. So... If this is the only creature, when it dies, it will put itself back.
Oh, no. Yeah. Really? The trigger goes on and it'll see itself? Yeah.
Yuck. But imagine you have a Golgari Thug in play and you have a good creature in your graveyard. Your opponent is kind of stuck where they don't want to attack into your 1/1. And so it's just holding off a bunch of ground creatures. And if you're like black-red, you have a bunch of sacrifice synergy cards. Golgari Thug fits really nicely into there. Because the dredge also unearths more creatures, right? Imagine you dredge Golgari Thug, dump a Shriekmaw in the yard. Now your opponent's like, well, if this ever dies, they get a Shriekmaw back. That's really bad.
Yeah. And do that over and over. I like it. Another enabler, similar to blue, but this one just happens to be in black, is Crow of Dark Tidings, 2 and a black for a 2/1 flyer. When it enter the battlefield or dies, you mill yourself for 2. So that can dump a bunch of cards into your graveyard because it's very easy for it to die, and it does it when it ETBs. And again, that this is going to get you to Treasure Cruise mana or dump some stuff in your yard for your Archaeomancers and stuff like that. There's another one called Grave Strength as an enabler. I'm really not a big fan of this card, but I mean, I don't know how all in we want to be, and maybe it's a thing. It's 1 and a black for a sorcery. It says choose target creature, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, then put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each creature card in your graveyard. Not just that you milled, but total. But it's just such a it just doesn't do quite enough. You need a target, and I might be wrong, but
so
it's sorcery
if it was an
speed.
instant you could win a combat or something, that'd be totally different.
I agree. Yeah. But again, you never know. If you want to be all in on self-mill, well, maybe you're running Grave Strength.
No,
but
I mean, if you can nug someone for 10 with it, it's cute. But I don't think you're really going to play this card.
I don't think so either. At least my guess would be that. This one, though, is a potential enabler as well. It's called Olivia's Dragoon. It's 1 and a black for a 2/2, but it has the activated ability, discard a card to give it flying until end of turn. But again, the key here is that you're discarding the card whenever you want and for no mana. So this could be a big time madness enabler for sure. And also can once again get you value, right? Like let's just put, you start putting these cards together and you go, oh, okay, I'm starting to get it. You play Olivia's Dragoon. You say, discard Golgari Thug, hit you for 2. Golgari Thug's in your yard. On your turn, you like dredge this thing, put 4 in. Oh, there's a Shriek Maw, whatever. Get the Thug back, play it. And your opponent has to start thinking about these things. It's a way to get dredgers in the yard. It's a way to get madness going as well. I don't believe that this is going to be a big theme, but I do believe that people will do this occasionally, which is there are actually 2 Reanimator cards in the set. There's Unburial Rites, which is 4 and a black for a sorcery, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It has Flashback for 3 and a white, which is a interesting pairing. But you can either mill that or discard it or whatever, and then cast it for a little cheaper if you have access to white mana, or you can just do it twice. There's a lot to do with Unburial Rites. And then there's Reanimate, the original, the OG. Oh, yeah. It's black for a sorcery. Put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. That's from either graveyard, by the way, and you lose life equal to its converted mana cost. But again, cards like Olivia's Dragoon, cards like Crow of Dark Tidings, cards like Golgari Thug, right? Even the Grave Strength. Look, you can dump some uncommon Eldrazi or whatever into your yard and be like, reanimate it, Annihilator you're dead, right? Like this is a thing that somebody will do at some point with these cards, and you can see that there's all these different ways you can.
Yeah, it's worth noting that Unburial Rites is really powerful. Because
it's just a good value card, right?
Zombifies for 5 mana is not unreasonable to play, and then this has Flashback, which is huge because not only can you discard it and then flash it back, you can mill it so it comes out of your graveyard. You don't have to do anything besides that. And it's just a 2-for-1, getting 2 creatures back is really strong too. So I imagine a lot of black decks will play, like blue-black will play Unburial Rites and off 2 sources, get to flash it back.
Yeah, and that's really nice. Really, really nice. It goes right along with what you're doing anyway. Let's move on to red. Red is aggressive. It has heroic and enablers, and it also seems to have the strongest madness theme going on as well. There's a couple of common heroic creatures and a lot of stuff to target them with. A Crone Crusader and Arena Athlete. A Crone Crusader is probably the best one. It's red for a 1/1. Heroic, whenever you cast a spell that targets it, you get a 1/1 red soldier creature token with haste, so you can just start spewing out a bunch of little tokens. And then Arena Athlete's a 2/1 for 1 and a red with heroic. Whenever you cast a spell that targets it, target creature an opponent controls can't block this turn, so you can kind of knock off their balance and start hitting them. And these are both common, and they're also cheap. They're 1 red mana and 1 and a red, so you can actually get them down and then start slamming auras on them. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that red also has in the madness theme. They also have some kind of cool like sideways stuff. Like anger is a 3 and a red for a 2/2 haste, but it says as long as this is in your graveyard and you have a mountain, all your creatures have haste. So it's not a madness card, but it rewards you for playing cards like Faithless Looting.
Yeah, totally. And just getting stuff or discarding it,
or milling it or any of those things.
Totally. So that's a real thing. When it comes to targeting heroic creatures, red's very good at it. They have Reckless Charge, which is red for a sorcery charge. Creature gets +3/+0 and gains haste. This card doesn't look like much, but it can kill you out of nowhere. It also has Flashback for 2 and a red. So really powerful, even though it doesn't look like. Yeah, it kicks butt. That card is scary. There's a card called Soul's Fire in the set. It's 2 and a red for an instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to any target at instant speed. And remember, this is not fighting. This is punching, if you will. And so, you use Soul's Fire to target one of your things. You get a 1/1. Their guy can't block. Or if it's just big, or if it gets a +1/+1 counter, like some of the white heroic cards,
that'll
you can
resolve
Soul's Fire
first
for a lot. That's right. The heroic trigger will resolve. It'll be bigger. And Soulsfire does it to any target. So you can even just finish off your opponent with it if it's big enough. And then there's also Undying Rage, 2 and a red for an aura at common. Enchant creature. Creature gets +2/+2 and can't block. When Undying Rage is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, return Undying Rage to its owner's hand. So you can potentially cast that multiple times throughout the course of the game, guarding yourself multiple heroic triggers as well. Madness enablers, there's some decent ones here. You mentioned it a second ago. Faithless Looting, red for a sorcery, draw 2, then discard 2 with flashback for 2 and a red. This looks like a kind of a like a card that could enable multiple different things in this set, not just Madness, but all the other stuff that we've been talking about with the graveyard.
Yeah, Faithless Looting was going to be really, really important, I think, because the rate on this is pretty good. It's not an expensive card, and you're able to make a lot of your cards work. Not only Madness, but it also combines nicely with Flashback, with Reanimator. So this is the kind of card I would expect to be a pretty high pick, despite being the kind of card that's not good in normal limited environments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it enables so many things, it could actually be quite good. Mad Prophet, that's what we're trying to make here. 3 and a red for a 2/2 with haste. Tap it. Discard a card, draw a card. So this is rummaging, which normally we don't prefer to looting, but here it can enable a bunch of stuff because you are discarding the card first. I don't know if that'll matter too much, but the point is that you can do it, discard a Madness card, pay its Madness cost, get the value of that card that you discarded, and then still draw a card off of
Mad Prophet is pretty good. Like the haste is worth the extra mana a lot of the time. Like, you're not happy that it's cost 4. You'd rather just be kind of like a normal looter that costs 3. But haste kind of makes up for that. You get as many cards as you would normally get.
Yeah, that's right. The only difference is that you're often tapped out the turn you play it, so you can't pay for Madness. But you still get, rummaging is also just a thing.
Yeah, it's good by itself. Mad Prophet is not a card you want too many copies of if you don't have synergies, but I would expect most red decks to have at least a couple cards that work with it.
Yeah, I think so too. Also, it used to be an uncommon, and it's a common.
Yeah, another downshift. Another Madness enabler we have here is Spark Spitter. It says 2 and a red for a 1/3. Elemental spell shaper at common. You can pay a red and tap it and discard a card to make a 3/1 trample haste token that you sack end of turn. This was part of a cycle from Future Sight that had cards that made tokens that were also cards. Like Spark Elemental is just a card. There's a, Llanowar Mentor is part of the cycle. It makes Llanowar Elves. Like it actually makes a token that is Llanowar Elves. So Spark Spitter is pretty cute, but it is a Madness enabler here, and not quite as exciting of one as the other ones, because if you don't care about a 3/1 that goes away at end of turn, then this is really just a kind of weak discard outlet. But note that you can block with Spark Elementals. So it's not actually the worst defensive. But
and it's going to feel stupid, right? Like if you Spark Spitter and then like put in a Madness card and then you get the 3/1, like that's a lot of stuff happening,
if you're like,
you're getting some pretty
if you
good
put
value.
a Spark Spitter, then you're like, discard Fiery Temper, kill your creature, attack for 3. Next turn, discard Reckless Worm, play at attack for 3. But that's cute, but it's still probably worse than Mad Prophet.
Yeah, probably so. And by the way, we should talk about those payoffs.
Yeah.
There's 3 main Madness cards here. You just mentioned Fiery Temper. That's 1 red for an instant, does 3 damage to any target, but its Madness cost is red. So if you can discard it, it's a lightning bolt. And then Reckless Worm seems to be a very nice payoff too. It's 3 red for a 4/4 with trample, but its Madness cost is just 2 and a red.
It's an Arrogant Worm.
And that's instant speed. Yeah, but that's fat. Like you can do that even in the middle of combat, right? Like if you have
imagine you have Mad Prophet out and your opponent has a 3/3 and you have 3 mana. They might not even be supposed to attack because like you discarded common and you just ambush their creature and they're in a world of pain.
Yeah, so that's pretty sweet. And then the last one's a really interesting one too. It's called Malevolent Whispers. It's 3 and a red for a sorcery. It says, and by the way, it's uncommon, which is really important, I think. It says, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap it. It gains +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. But here's the key. It's a sorcery, but it has Madness.
Right.
Now, the Madness cost is the exact same as the regular casting cost. It's 3 and a red, but you're getting value because it's a card that you were discarding anyway, and it enables you to do this potentially at instant speed, which is really devastating.
Yeah, for those who haven't had the pleasure of playing with Ray of Command, that was 3 and a blue instant, steal a creature till end of turn. It's a disgusting ability. Again, imagine they've got a 4/4 and a 4/3 or something along those lines. If you can take one and trade, you just 2-for-1 them and kill 2 creatures that probably cost them a lot of mana. Even if they've got like a 5/5 and a 4/4, you can still just take one and block, and then they lose their 4/4 and you don't take any damage to that combat. But it's not that hard to line up blocks, especially since this is giving +2/+0. Now they have a 5/5 and a 3/3. You're like, take your 3/3, they trade. And it's just unbelievable. So this is one of the bigger payoffs, especially if you have instant speed madness enablers. So you're talking more mad profit than you are faithless looting.
That's right. Also, there seems to be a sacrifice sub-theme from Red and Black. And while there doesn't seem to be a common way to threaten or steal a creature for the turn, Malevolent Whispers should absolutely excel in that type of archetype where you have sacrifice outlets so you can steal their creature, hit them with it, and then sacrifice it. They don't ever get it back. Green, last color here. Graveyard stuff again. Basically, Delve and Dredge are the kind of name of the game here, with some other kind of random payoffs. There's cards like Become Immense, 5 and a green, instant. Target creature gets +6/+6 until end of turn with Delve. Hooting Mandrills, similar Delve payoff. It's a common 5 and a green for a 4/4 with Trample that has Delve, so you could pay as little as just green mana for it, for example. But then there's also cards like Boneyard Worm, which is kind of a build around, but it can be huge. It's 1 and a green for a star, which means that its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Again, if you're dredging or self-milling, you can get 4 or 5 creatures and have a 2-mana 5/5. Unfortunately, it's hard to make that thing really work. Like turn 2, you often just
I would
can't
not
cast
recommend
it at
casting
all.
at turn 2 now.
Yes, and everybody's done that.
What if you lead with a
from
faceless
Innistrad or
looting?
whatever. But yeah, there you go. You might, right? Or you can try to set up some shenanigans. But generally, it comes down in the mid to late game. But it can be really big for 2 mana, so that's a thing. There's a card called Brawn, which is similar to the one called Anger that you mentioned before. It's just the green version. It's 3 and a green for a 3/3 with Trample. But here's the key: if it's in your graveyard and you control a forest, creatures you control have Trample. Okay, fine, right? I don't think that's super great, but whatever. If your Boneyard Worm is a 6/6, you're probably pretty happy to have free Trample on it. Eweezy, Eternal Witness is printed in this set. 1 green, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So there's a lot going on there. There's a Dredger, like sort of your bread and butter Dredger's called Golgari Brown Scale. It's 1 green for a 2/3. And when it's put into your hand from the graveyard, you gain 2 life. So when you dredge it back, you gain 2 life, and it has Dredge 2. So not great, right? This is nothing about this card screams awesome, but you could see how it could work, and you could have it be part of your graveyard themed deck or whatever. There's also a card called Groundskeeper as another kind of random payoff. It's green for a 1/1. It's common, and it says 1 and a green, return target basic land card from your graveyard to your hand. So if you're doing the thing, you can get a bunch of lands out of your graveyard.
Yeah, that one is a little weaker because you don't really need lands number 5 and 6 all that badly, but it is nice with cards like Faithless Looting. That card just seems really good to me. I think Faithless Looting is going to be an all-star.
Yeah, speaking of, another possible enabler for kind of all of this stuff is Satyr Wayfinder.
Another good one.
And yeah, 1 and a green for a 1/1 Satyr at common. When it enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them into your hand, but you put the rest in your graveyard. So it helps you hit your lands and make sure that you're consistent in that way, but you're dumping, 3 or sometimes 4 cards into your graveyard that could have all types of effect. They could have Dredge, or they could just, you could be filling up the yard for a Boneyard Worm or for a Hooting Mandrills the next turn with Delve. And it's also just kind of a fine card in and of itself. So I think Satyr Wayfinder is a card I'm going to look for this type of deck as well.
It's a really solid card. I think even in decks without much synergy, it's still a 2-for-1, right? And it's a 1/1 plus land for 2 mana. That's a good deal.
Yeah, it's a good deal. So I like that. Let's take a look at a few sample archetypes. I kind of broke this down. I did this actually for an article that I wrote for WotC, but I figured that it would be applicable here as well. A little, but I figured it would be applicable. But basically what I did is, rather than try to write out all 10 archetypes, of which there's quite a few that I don't really understand. And the reason I don't is because inevitably with 10 archetypes in a
Two or
master
three
set, there's 3 to 4 they just don't do anything.
3 or 4, just brick. Basically, it's like, hey, the blue-green archetype is supposed to be this, but in reality, don't do it. Like black-white's supposed to be Reanimator, but there's not enough support, so don't do it.
Right. So just don't do it, or they just didn't, they didn't focus on that. Where when you look at like the one we're going to look at first, red, white, heroic, it's just all over it, right? There's a bunch of heroic cards at common and uncommon that you can get. And then there's a bunch of ways to trigger it. So it's like, okay, I get it. You're incentivizing me to do that. And so what I did is I picked an archetype for people that like to beat down. I picked an archetype for people that like to do weird stuff, and I picked an archetype for people that want to get value, right? So those are the ones that we're going to go over. This is the beatdown one, red, white, heroic. We mentioned Arena Athlete, a Crone Crusader, Winged Steed Rider, but there's 2 uncommons in white that we haven't talked about that are like, dang, they're really good. Phalanx Leader, white for a 1/1. I know you're not excited yet, but it's got heroic. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So even if you only have 2 or 3 creatures, you heroic a Phalanx Leader a couple of times and you just have this huge board. So that's sweet. And then also Hero of Eros, which is 1 and a white for a 2/2. This thing used to be a rare. Is that right?
This is a downshift. Yeah. And this card is not bad, though. It has some unbelievable flavor text. So this is 1 and a white for a 2/2 at uncommon. Aura spells you cast cost a 1 less to cast. And as heroic, whenever you target it with a spell, you put a +1 counter on it. The flavor text is, my left has felled a Cyclops. My right has slain a giant. I bring both to every fight. This is literally this is the tickets to the gunship guy. He's just like flexing. He's just like,
it's like this tank top.
It's like, I hope there's no gun control here because, and it's just like, okay, calm down.
Yeah.
But
other flavor text submissions were suns out, guns out. Yeah, but these cards are really powerful, when it comes to targeting them and getting a big payoff for that. And, you can do that with a bunch of the cards that we mentioned, Hyena Umbra, Mammoth Umbra, Undying Rage. There's others too, though. There's cards like Double Cleave, which is 1 and a red or white. It's a hybrid. Instant. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So you can just get an extra +1/+1 counter or whatever it is that you're getting for targeting it for heroic, and also maybe just kill your opponent that turn.
Yeah.
So that's a thing.
I think this archetype's actually pretty good. Like, just look at these cards. Like, there's like decent payoffs and really good enablers. So wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. One really cool one is Conviction.
This card's really funny.
It's 1 and a white. Yeah, it's 1 and a white for an aura. Enchants a creature. The enchanted creature gets +1/+3, which is, by the way, surprisingly good. The +1/+3, it's better than it looks. But here's the catch. You can pay a white to return Conviction to its owner's hand. So your first thought is, oh, sweet, if my creature's going to die, I'll get Conviction back and put it on something else, which is true. You can do that. That's pretty cool. But you can also just do it. And if you do, and you start triggering a heroic creature 2 or 3 times, over the course of the game, that creature is going to be huge. You can save the Conviction. You can even move it onto something else pre-combat if you have enough mana. It gives you a repeat heroic enabler that can be really powerful and surprisingly holds its own on its own anyway. Even if you're not.
That's one of the cool things about the master sets is these cards are all reprints, right? None of these cards are new. So it's not like we're designing new cards, when the designers are putting these together, but they get to put cards with new context, and Conviction and Heroic just never have gotten combined before. This is a card from like Tempest, or I guess Exodus. So
Stronghold.
Yeah. So it
old school, baby. They went way back for that one.
Getting to go off with Conviction, Hero of Eros, which is a really good combo, is really cool because it's like a new thing that didn't exist, despite both cards being not new cards.
Yeah. And then, of course, we didn't mention it, but, you're going to be filling this in with powerful value creatures of varying sorts, just raw power level, right? It doesn't necessarily have to synergize, and removal spells and stuff like that, too. But we're kind of getting at the heart of what makes these decks different rather than just, it's, sword supply, whatever the best white removal spells, you're going to run those too. For people that want to do something a little weird, there is a red-black sacrifice deck with numerous payoffs in this set. So we mentioned, what is that card called again? The one red aura? I always forget the name of it. I've never actually played with it. But
one red aura?
Yeah, isn't it whenever you sacrifice a creature or sacrifice something you can pay 2? Yeah,
it's not
thank you.
It's
Furnace Celebration. Oh, I said aura. Yeah, dumb. I'm an enchantment. Yes. So Furnace Celebration is one that can absolutely be a build around. But as I mentioned before, there's actually cards that can pay you off for it just on their own. One of the more powerful ones that doesn't necessarily look like it is Hissing Iguanar. This is 2 and a red for a 3/1. And whenever another creature dies, you can have Hissing Iguanar deal 1 damage to target player, or this has been retemplated, Planeswalker. But basically, whenever anything dies, they start taking damage. So if you use a removal spell on their creature, they take a damage. If they kill your creature, they take a damage. If you get them down to 5, you just attack with everything and they lose the game on the spot. And if you have repeated sacrifice outlets, especially for tokens or anything like that, this thing can actually add up to a lot of damage. Same thing with Magma, which is 3 red for a 4/4 elemental. It's an uncommon. That used to be a rare, right? I think it did. Yeah, it did. From Rise of the Eldrazi. You can pay, downshift again. So you can pay 1 mana and sacrifice a non-land permanent and have it do 1 damage to any target. So that starts throwing around a lot of damage pretty quickly. You can sacrifice your whole board. If you have a Hissing Iguanar and a Magma out and you sacrifice some other creature, it'll do 2 damage, and it starts to add up really quickly to either wipe away the board or just get your opponent dead pretty quickly. So Magma, again, a downshift, those things are very powerful for doing that kind of stuff. It also gives you an enabler for the Furnace Celebration. And we mentioned Malevolent Whispers before. This is a type of card that can make that work. You get up to 5 mana, you steal their thing, you attack them, and then you Magma it to do another damage to them, just to add insult to injury. They also put Garna the Bloodflame in this, which is a relatively recent card from Dominaria. Yeah, but it's a really good fit. 3 black-red, just as a refresher. She's legendary human warrior at 3/3. She's got flash, but when Garna the Bloodflame enters the battlefield, return to your hand all creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from anywhere this turn, and then also other creatures you control have haste. So again, you can set up some cute stuff where you Magma away like 2 creatures when you get up to 7 mana, and then you go Garna, get them back, and just start to really grind your opponent down while controlling the board as well. And then you should also remember that I mentioned it before, but that Evoke is a sacrifice ability. So Shriekmaw is the best example. If you evoke a Shriekmaw, it says you may cast a spell for its evoke cost. If you do, it's sacrificed when it enters the battlefield. That counts. That will trigger anything that cares about sacrificing or a creature dying or whatever. And so you should be able to leverage that to your advantage as well. There's also Ingot Chewer, though I don't expect to see that as much as, a more playable card like Shriekmaw, even if it is a rarity shift. Or not shift, but different rarity. So yeah, if you want to get cute, this actually feels like a pretty cool way to do it. You just have to find the payoffs within the set.
Yeah, the one thing that makes me
go ahead.
wary about the red-black deck is that it doesn't have a common threat. So having a common way to steal your opponent's creatures is a very big difference. And this just has the uncommon Malevolent Whispers. So because the most busted thing these decks ever do is to steal their opponent's creature and sack it for value. And
that is correct.
You're not in a spot where you're doing that quite as often here.
No, I definitely have I view the Malevolent Whispers thing as a bonus that you get sometimes, but this is a Hissing Iguanar deck. Yeah. Like this is a, I'm going to chip at you. You're losing life total every turn, or every time a creature trades, you take 2. Like it just eats your life total down, and then you just finish them off. Last one, blue-black. This is, by the way, for people that like to get value.
No.
Blue-black graveyard value. Yeah. So this is kind of a combination of all of those things that we talked about before. Crow of Dark Tidings, that's the one that mills you when it ETBs or dies for 2. Deranged Assistant that makes mana and mills you. So
this deck looks really sweet.
Skullkeeper that mills you for 2. It looks awesome. Frantic Search is in this set at common. It's 2 and a blue for an instant. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands. Again, a madness and graveyard filling enabler, although generally not a card I actually love, because you are just down a card in the transaction.
You are, but with enough cards like Treasure Cruise, Gurmag Angler, Madness, and Flashback cards, I think Treasure Cruise, Frantic Search might be a high pick. In Vintage Masters, whichever, I think that's the one it was, Frantic Search was actually a pretty good common, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was good here, even though it is base level down a card.
Yeah. If you can get enough advantage off of each time you cast it, you're good to go. Payoffs. Oh boy, here we go. Gurmag Angler, 5/5 for sometimes 1 mana. Think twice. You just dump it in your graveyard for value. You mill it and you get a card later on. Moan of the Unhallowed we mentioned before. You get a bunch of zombies. Treasure Cruise. Stitch Drake. Here's one. Rise from the Tides. 5 and a red for a sorcery. An uncommon. 5 and a blue. Wow, red. Create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. I mean, that could be 5, right? You could be
could be 11.
Tides. Could be 11, right? I mentioned the Meringue River Prowler and the Archaeomancer.
No,
there's a card called Living Lore.
I don't like River Prowler very much in this deck because a 2/2 unblockable is just that can't block. It's just not something that accomplishes what this deck's trying to accomplish. So yeah, you can discard it and play it and not be down a card, but this deck's looking to win the game and control the game. It's with slower and more powerful cards, not chip in for 2 a turn. So
yeah. And it's even worse. It's a 2/1. Living Lore is kind of interesting. It's 3 and a blue for a star. When it enters a battlefield, exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Living Lore's power and toughness are each equal to the exiled card's converted mana cost. So maybe get like a...
The story on this is very nice.
Yes, whenever Living Lore deals combat damage, you may sacrifice it. If you do, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. It just the art kind of says it all. It just unravels right in front of you.
Note that it doesn't have to deal damage to a player like a lot of these cards. That's what you kind of expect. This, if it gets into combat, you can sacrifice it. You don't have to though.
Interesting. So you can just keep it around and keep battling.
Right. So let's say you exiled like a 5-drop spell. It's now a 5/5, and you can just keep hitting like it's a 5/5, or at some point you can cash in for that spell. Though note that if it trades in combat, you can't sacrifice it because it's gone. So you're never really getting to get super value out of it, but it is pretty good still.
Now, it does do the damage, though. Like, if they're 4/4 attacks into it for whatever reason and you go block, you can just say, sure, and then you can sacrifice it, but it will have also done the damage. Is that correct?
So you can choose what to do,
lose their
and
creature.
your opponent's not going to know until afterwards.
Yeah, and their creature's still dead regardless. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And it's a weird kind of interesting card that might work, but again, these are all the types of cards that you can explore if you have enough ways to get cards into your graveyard. And to kind of recap things here, by the way, because that is the last of the color pairs that we're going to explore here, is there seems to be a huge graveyard value sub-theme here with Dredge, Delve, and Flashback being kind of the headliners and the ones that are supported by multiple colors and multiple cards, even within certain colors. There also seems to be sub-themes based on, again, cards kind of changing zones, mainly around madness, right? Like madness is kind of a thing that you see just enough. But as we mentioned, there aren't that many madness cards in the set. This isn't just like one of those sets where you're going to see it, all over the place. There's 8 total, but they're all at common or uncommon. So you probably will see them fairly frequently. So I fully expect to see, madness decks around. But at the same time, keep in mind that madness, if you don't enable it, a lot of these cards are pretty medium. Some of them are still good. Fiery Temper, you just play it, right? It's fine to just play it.
5-mana 4/4 trample is just not going to cut it in a set like this.
Boring. That's too boring, yeah. So I think that one of the keys that you're going to want to sit down when you start to draft, figure out what color pair you're in. You know what all the colors do now, and start to ask yourself, okay, if I'm these 2 colors, what are the things that go together well? What are some of the cards that I should be looking out for? Then you need to fill it out in these sort of 2 columns in your mental deck list. 1, what are my payoffs? 2, what are my enablers, right? If you have a bunch of madness cards, you need to start thinking about, okay, I need to get a Mad Prophet. Even if there's a good card, I need these enablers to make this deck work. And if this master set is like other master sets, you will be heavily rewarded for committing and for taking cards that enable your strategy, even if they don't look as powerful as some of the stuff that
all the master set have been pretty linear, where each color pair is doing the thing it's doing, and not that hard to draft within those a lot of the time. So another thing that you really want to look out for is what are the cards that bridge between multiple different archetypes, because those are safer to take. I'm guessing like Faithless Looting is one of those cards. It just seems like it works in a couple different places. Same with like Mad Prophet, like the discard outlet type cards. And then also a lot of the blue cards like that fill your graveyard in a variety of different ways can work with Delve or Madness or Flashback, and that is a lot of good flexibility.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for those for sure, especially early in the draft where you can pick up those pivot cards and you can kind of figure out where you want to go a little bit later because you know that they'll go well in multiple archetypes. That's a huge thing with these modern master sets. There's so many cards that can go either direction, and those end up going up sharply in value once you figure out what they are. Okay, I'm excited. Dude, this set looks
I'm
super
really
sweet.
excited to play it. It's, again, we're going to the Grand Prix, so definitely going to be jamming on this. And I'm actually getting a box of it, so I'm going to do a live draft as well, or hopefully two. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do one as well. So we'll give you an update. Again, we don't like to go super all in on we like to do a full show. Yeah. I mean, look, that we're dedicated to it. But, again, most of our audience we've asked do these sets about once. So having multiple deep dive shows on these sets doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the long term.
Ravnica Allegiance is coming out in like a month. So,
yeah. So we'll be transitioning our eyeballs in that direction. All right, that's going to do it for this one. Good luck at your Ultimate Master. And of course, hopefully you just pull some sweet stuff. And don't be afraid to take. Look, if you sit down and you open some expensive card, you can take it. Just take the dang thing. Put it in your binder, trade it, sell it, whatever. There's no shame in that. These packs are expensive. And, you're going to have to, dedicate some of your magic money to do it. So if you open up a sweet one, get some of that money back. Nothing wrong with that. You can still, if these, if history is any indicator, these are somewhat cube-like in the sense that you're never short on playables. It's never a playables question. It's just a matter of how powerful your deck can be. So keep that in mind, and good luck with your opens. That's going to do it for this show. You can find us on social media if you'd like to say hi. I'm Marshall_LR pretty much everywhere. Luis is LSV, same thing. You can find everything related to the podcast at LRcast.com. I want to thank our sponsor, channelfireball.com, for sponsoring the show. And if you do open some sweet stuff from Ultimate Masters and you're thinking, you know what, I'd rather chain this into maybe a pre-order of the next set or a single that I want for my deck, you can sell them back to Channel Fireball. If you trade them in for store credit, you'll even get a 30% trade-in bonus, or you can just get money. You can choose whatever you want, but I guarantee you're going to come away with some pretty cool stuff from Ultimate Masters, given what I've seen in the set. And if it's not, your particular cup of tea, it's all back to CFB, and they'll hook you right up with that 30% trade-in bonus. That's going to do it for this one. We'll talk to you next week.
So this is a kind of funny story that if you're not embedded in card games, especially the game industry, you probably wouldn't have heard it, but it's wild. So a lot of folks, names who you'd recognize, kind of got their game design start with Upper Deck. So Upper Deck is a company, still exists actually, and does sports cards. That's actually what it's most famous for. That's where it made a lot of its money. But it published like the Versus card game. So this is like the Marvel superhero card game that was around for a while, and a lot of Magic players work for them as game designers. The funny thing is that what happened between Upper Deck and Konami. So you've heard of Yu-Gi-Oh, right? I would hope.
Oh, yeah.
So Konami is a company that makes Yu-Gi-Oh, and Upper Deck acquired the rights to distribute Yu-Gi-Oh in the US. And that's worth a lot. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh is just one of the most popular brands in the world. For reasons that I don't think anyone really fully understands, Upper Deck decided to start counterfeiting Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
What?
So they have the license to distribute Yu-Gi-Oh cards. They do that. And I'm looking at Wikipedia now, and second quarter American sales reached 17 million. So that's one quarter. So that's the kind of money we're talking about. Yet Upper Deck decided, I think it was the CEO at the time who apparently, had a lot going on, asked for a list of the most expensive Yu-Gi-Oh cards from someone, like one of the people who worked there, and then hired a company to counterfeit them and then sold them. It's like if if Magic decided hey, we're gonna Wizards of the Coast. It's like, hey, we're gonna hire this company to distribute all the Magic cards in Japan, right? Because it's an American company, maybe it wants a U.S. or Japanese company to distribute, and then the CEO of the Japanese company decides this is cool and all. This makes us a lot of money. You know what would make more money? Me printing out a bunch of Black Lotuses.
This actually happened. I never heard this.
Definitely happened. I mean, it's
that is insane. That sounds like super illegal too.
Well, yeah. I mean, the court records are just there. So it ended about as you would expect, which was Konami pulled the license horribly, sued the hell out of Upper Deck. It looks like they settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but it was just very clear that Upper Deck was found in breach of contract. It's just like.
Do you think it was $1,000 that they settled for?
Yeah, I do not. But it's just
slightly.
It's just so insane to have this contract, which is worth presumably many millions given the sales numbers, and just try to make like $30K on the side, counterfeiting, Primeval Titan equivalents. I don't know, Pot of Greed or Blue Eyes White Dragon, whatever the Yu-Gi-Oh equivalent is. But it's just like. I don't know what process of thought gets you to that point.
My mind is
and from what I understand, it wasn't particularly subtle or hard to figure out, or there was no tracks covering. It was just like on the record stuff that it was just like, this is just like point A to point B. Here we are. So
wow.
Even for an industry that has a lot of weird stuff going on, this really takes the cake. And that's just like,
that's absurd. So the lesson is don't do that.
Yeah, it's really hard to actually get an actionable lesson out of this because most of our listeners are probably not going to be holding the licensing rights for a major brand. But if you are to find yourself in that situation, I would recommend you don't on the side try to counterfeit some of those cards.
Okay, that's what they come here for, Luis. The hard-hitting advice.